Welcome to Weekly Space News from Ad Astra. I am Swapna Krishna. Today we're going to talk about Voyager 1 seemingly coming back from the dead, NASA budget cuts leading to the end of a very important telescope, the first eclipse cloud cover forecast, and some spaceflight updates, including a delay for Boeing's Starliner launch. But let's start with some much needed good news about Voyager 1. A few weeks ago, I delivered a pretty sad update about Voyager 1 in one of these news roundups. The spacecraft was sending gibberish of ones and zeros back to Earth, and the team feared that this was the end for the historic spacecraft. Well, on March 13th, NASA delivered an encouraging update about Voyager 1. The issue has been with one of Voyager 1's 3 onboard computers, the FDS, or Flight Data System, which is what packages both the science and the engineering data on the health of the spacecraft to send back to Earth. The team sent a poke to Voyager on March 1st that was supposed to try to prompt it to reroute around any corrupted sections of its software. They received a response on March 3rd. Remember, it takes 22.5 hours each way to communicate with Voyager 1, now in interstellar space. One section of the FDS transmission received by the Deep Space Network was different than the rest of the garbled, unreadable binary of zeros and ones. The team was able to figure out that it's a readout of the entire FDS memory. By comparing this readout to previous signals, they may be able to figure out what the problem is with Voyager 1 and fix it. That means there may be hope yet for this spacecraft. I think that's some pretty cool troubleshooting from 15 billion miles away, and I really hope it works. Now, this is less cool, but honestly, I promise this is just as interesting. NASA budgets. Given all the issues around budgets and spending bills in the US Congress, NASA is only just learning about their budget for 2024 now, which is halfway through the fiscal year. The fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th. It's not very convenient, but now NASA is facing some very hard decisions as their actual 2024 budget is 2% less than they thought it would be, and they're not going to be receiving any dramatic increases for fiscal year 2025. That means they have to make some budget cuts. Now, we have NASA's fiscal year 2025 budget proposals, and there are some things in it that look a little bit grim. On the chopping block is, possibly, the Chandra X-ray Observatory, along with some budget cuts to the Hubble Space Telescope. The document reads, and I quote, NASA proposes to reduce the budgets of the Hubble and Chandra observatories in order to balance investments in future astrophysics missions and missions in operations. Keep in mind that as I talk about this, nothing is set in stone. This is just the situation right now. These 2 observatories are the most expensive to operate after JWST, and they're also 2 of the oldest. Hubble launched in 1990 and Chandra in 1999. The Chandra X-ray Space Telescope is currently the only high-resolution X-ray telescope in the world. It is still doing amazing science. If it's shut down, there is no replacement anytime soon, not at least for a decade. Part of the key here is Chandra often works with JWST to give us more information on observations of the early universe, such as early universe galaxies that are more massive than we expect. It's doing important work, and we do not have anything else like it. But what NASA says, and I get it, is that Chandra is aging, which means that operating the spacecraft is getting harder and more expensive. The insulation on the spacecraft's exterior is degrading. That means it's warming. That makes it a lot harder to take observations. The proposed solution in NASA's budget is to start stepping the Chandra team down until they are at minimal operations. They don't spell out what happens after that, but it's not hard to take the leap here and interpret this as a functional cancellation of the mission. Hubble is in better shape. NASA is not canceling that, but the budget has been reduced by 5%. Thankfully, Hubble doesn't have the operational issues of Chandra. It's functioning well and has 3 working gyroscopes out of 6. These are needed to point the telescope, and they've actually designed it so now Hubble could work with just 1 gyroscope. There's a plan to keep the spacecraft operating for the next decade, at which point its orbit will have likely delayed below 500 kilometers and science operations will no longer be possible. NASA estimates that this will happen by the mid-2030s unless the spacecraft receives a boost. In 2022, NASA and SpaceX announced that they were embarking on a feasibility study of boosting Hubble's orbit with a private mission, probably Polaris Dawn, a private SpaceX mission funded by Jared Isaacman, which is currently scheduled to launch sometime this summer. That is apparently still on the table according to this budget document. NASA is currently reviewing the results of that feasibility study with SpaceX, so hopefully we hear more soon. Both of these spacecraft will receive mini senior reviews in the next few months, according to a NASA Science Directorate town hall on the budget that was held this week. These occur when NASA wants to review whether a spacecraft has achieved its primary mission and decide whether or not to extend it. It's easy to get a little worked up about this. These are people's jobs, and also it feels wasteful and unnecessary to cut loose observatories that are still doing great work. I think at this point we all have an emotional attachment to Hubble. Though, don't discount Chandra just because it doesn't put out as many pretty photos. It's interesting that we don't have anything else like Chandra, and its loss would be devastating for global X-ray astronomy. But it's on the chopping block, and Hubble isn't. Now, to be clear, I am not advocating for the cancellation of Hubble, so do not yell at me that I am saying Hubble should be canceled, because that's not what I am saying. But I feel like NASA knows there would be tremendous public outcry if they canceled Hubble due to budget cuts, whereas Chandra is much less well known and that one can kind of slide under the radar. But NASA's also in a tough spot. The reality is that in order to focus on the next great observatories, the Roman Telescope and Habitable Worlds, which is scheduled for the 2040s, they need funding to do this, and NASA's doing great work with less money than expected. We'll see what happens, but let's hope this isn't as bad as it seems. And if you're wondering how Mars sample return, which I talked about in a previous news roundup, it's having some major funding and over budget issues. If you're wondering how it fared, well, it is not even in the budget right now, which means that if the independent review board comes back with its alternative and hopefully more cost-effective mission design, they're going to have to carve that money out from the planetary science budget. That's a different budget than the astrophysics one I've been talking about. But it's a clear sign that we might not be done with budget trade-offs yet. Moving to science. Did you see news this week that JWST's measurements of the Hubble constant have thrown a wrench in our understanding of the universe? Basically, we've known about the Hubble tension for a while, but JWST confirmed that the Hubble Space Telescope's measurement of the Hubble constant were accurate and not observation error. I promise, it really is fascinating stuff. I did an entire video on what it means, so check that out if you are so inclined. Okay, more JWST stuff. One of my favorite things to do is talk about the cool photos that come out from JWST. This is the Triangulum Galaxy, located about 2.73 million light years away, so not that far from us in cosmic terms. And it's host to a star-forming region called NGC 604. That's churning out the hottest, most massive stars, and there is nothing like it in the Milky Way. It's taken by JWST's NIRCam in near-infrared, and it's about 1,700 light years across. This region of space has a concentration of 200 B-type and O-type stars, which can be 100 times more massive than our Sun. Finding this many supermassive stars in one place is rare, which is why scientists are so interested in this region. It's a rare peek into how these supermassive stars are born. The orange filaments in the image correspond to a carbon-based molecule called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, while the red is molecular hydrogen. The bluish-white you see is hydrogen ionized by UV radiation, and it looks kind of ghostly. You can also see holes in the gas here and there, where these stars and their stellar winds are carving it up. There's also another cool view of this galaxy from JWST. This is the MIRI, or mid-infrared image. The first thing that's noticeable about this, in comparison to the NIRCam image, is that there are significantly fewer stars visible. That's because these bright, hot stars don't emit as much mid-infrared light as they do near-infrared. This time, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons are the blue gas. Moving on, let's talk about the eclipse because it is getting closer. The first weather forecasts for the event are trickling out. Now remember that forecasts before about a week out are relatively unreliable, but if you're one of those people who wants every speck of information, then here you go. Accuweather's long-range meteorology team put out this map. It does not tell you what the weather will look like, so not a specific weather forecast, but it does show viewing conditions. So basically cloud cover based on predicted El Nino activity and a predicted cold front that may be moving across the US at the time. According to this map, the best viewing conditions will be Southwest Texas, parts of the Ohio Valley, and the Great Lakes. North of Syracuse, things aren't looking so good. I wouldn't immediately start trying to change your eclipse plans if the area you're heading might not have the best viewing conditions. For one, there's not much left in terms of lodging in the path of totality. But this preliminary look at cloud cover is worth keeping in mind. There are a couple of big flight announcements too. Of course, Starship had its third successful test flight on March 14th. They did lose Starship during re-entry, but it was a spectacular flight overall. Check out my video if you want to know more about how that went and a breakdown of my thoughts on its success. Boeing Starliner's first flight has been pushed to early May, but for once it's no fault of the spacecraft's or Boeing's. There's a bit of a spaceship traffic jam at the International Space Station, and NASA wants to let that clear before the test happens. Also, Crew 7's mission to the International Space Station is finally over. Their Crew Dragon splashed down safely on March 12th. The crew spent a total of 199 days in orbit. There's one more flight to talk about, Stratolaunch. The company had its first successful test flight of the Talon A1 or TA1. It's a hypersonic craft, so Mach 5 or 5 times the speed of sound, launched from the world's largest airplane. This test achieved, quote, speeds close to hypersonic flight. So they didn't quite get there, but they're happy with the results apparently, or they just want to make their investors happy. The main objectives were successful release of the TA1 craft and then acceleration and maintaining control until a splashdown in the ocean. Initially, Stratolaunch founder Paul Allen, the late Microsoft co-founder, wanted to use the plane to launch satellites, but after his death, Stratolaunch was acquired by Cerberus Capital Management. They reorganized the company to focus on hypersonic craft. And that is just about all the news I have for you this week. Thank you for watching. I am Swapna Krishna, and this is Ad Astra.